Fix more than you break. If you're the kind who takes the time to help a stranger in the rain.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, Grand Bahama. Good morning to those of you that are listening to us by way of Facebook. Want to encourage you to go ahead and share the broadcast. Let them know, make it make sense. It's on the air. Want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for listening in and tuning in. We want you to go ahead and share. Today is an amazing show. You do not want to miss today's show. We are responding to some of the comments that have been made by the president, and so we want to encourage you. Go ahead. I'm going to give you some time. We're going to be talking the Hawksbill agreement, and we're going to be responding to the comments by GBPA's president. And so I want to encourage you to go ahead, let them know it's going to be hot. Let me know if you can hear us. Those of you that are listening to us by way of Facebook, if your audio is good, your volume is good, let us know. And so we just want to encourage you to go ahead and share. Want to be able to say to you that we're live on 103.7 FM. We're also live on Facebook. Good morning to all of you in the TCI. Good morning to all of you in the United States. To my Aunt Les, to my sister Sanaja, good morning to all of you. I want to take this opportunity to wish my mother who gave birth to me, a very, very, very happy birthday, and pray that God will grant you another 65 years, that you would live to enjoy good health, good strength, and that you would enjoy. They asked her what she want for breakfast this morning. She said, Burger King. Who's eat Burger King on your birthday? But in here, she said, no, I want a cup of coffee from Burger King. So she had a cup of coffee from Burger King. And so good morning to you, Mom, and hope that you are enjoying. I'd see you in a see you. See you soon. And good morning to all of you that are listening. Special morning, good morning to GBPC. Good morning to Freeport Power down there. I know you're locked in. and you're loaded. Good morning to GBPA. I know you're listening because y'all didn't correct me on the date. So I know you're all straight. You're locked and loaded this morning. Good morning to all of you. Good morning. Good morning. Father, we pause to thank you for your goodness, your grace, your mercy, your love. God, we're nothing without you. We recognize that we need you every day. Continue to strengthen us, continue to keep us, continue to guide us. Let everything, God, that is done today be done to your honor and to your glory. Father, we thank you that you will continue to be in the midst of us. Order our lips today, God. Everything that's said will be to your honor and to your glory. We thank you for our guest. We pray that you will continue to strengthen him. You will continue to keep him, oh God. Continue to allow him to be that light in the midst, oh God, of all of us. We thank you for his knowledge. We thank you for his wisdom that you have given to him, that he'll be able to display, oh God, and to share with those that are listening today. We thank you. We give you praise. In Jesus' name, amen. Good morning, Dove listeners. Good morning to all of you. I want to be able to say this. Today we have in studio with us C. Allen Johnson. I call him the walking Hawksbill Creek Agreement, the walking Constitution of the Bahamas, the walking information that knows his stuff. I want to also say before we get into today's show, those of you that are listening, those of you that are following us, we took a stand last week Friday. We sent a clear message to GBPA. We let them know what we stand for. We let them know what we're expecting. We gave them a document that gave them 30 days to respond. So for those of you that want us to go back tomorrow and protest every Friday and every day, we're not going to fight like that. When that time comes, we will do that. But we got the attention of GBPA. We're grateful for this attention. We are now going to give them the opportunity to tally up their information and to respond to us. I can't tell you, Grand Bahama, they're talking, they're calling, they are concerned. And so we will meet as a group with GBPA in the days to come. We are just about locking down a date, a time, and a location, and we will meet with them. I want to encourage you, though, Grand Bahama, a date for the community discussion has been set. Those of you that are in business, those of you that are in the community, the 28th of March at the Belinda Wilson auditorium that is right next door to Sir Jack Hayward High School, the Teachers Union building, at 6 p.m. I want to encourage you to find the time, put it in your calendar, mark the date, save the date, do whatever you got to do to the date, and come out and be a part of the poor talks, the community talks. They say that they're coming to talk to you, your issues, your concerns. They're coming to hear them and address them. Make every plans and effort to be there. I wasn't scheduled to be on the island, but I can tell you I've made every necessary adjustments to be in Grand Bahama for the 28th. And I will be there, God's willing. If they don't, hallelujah, otherwise, I will be there. And I'm coming. I promised that I will behave myself. What I don't want to do is to go there, Sea Island, and to create a disruption. The people need information. The people need to ask questions. What I would say to Grand Bahama Port Authority is broaden your shoulders. Humble yourself. People are coming. They're coming frustrated. They're coming agitated. They're coming, all those things, they come in. And so humble yourself. Know how to talk, know when to talk. Everything does not warrant a response. You say, get out your emotions and get out your feelings. I would encourage you on the 28th to do the same. Okay? And so Grand Bahama saved the date, the 28th of March at 6 p.m. No, they ain't paying me for this. This one for free. I doing this one for y'all because I want to make sure y'all know that the meeting is set for the community, not just the community of Grand Bahama, but also the business community. They bring with all their top dogs. There's going to be, all of them going to be there. All of them. I wonder if the St. George's and the Haywoods can be there because I saw the St. George's in the video, but I didn't see the Haywood in the video. I know anyhow. Let me don't get trapsy on that. But all of them supposed to be there. All. Even the head of security is supposed to be there. Make sure you guys are there. You save the date. You be out. Be a part of that discussion. All fun and jokes aside, this is serious business. You want to talk. I don't have all of the answers. I don't have the knowledge. And so we've been able, whether it was because of our protests or it was not, the fact remains they're coming, and they're coming to hear from you and to be able to address your concerns. And that is what matters for us, that they would be able to deal with them and you'll be able to voice whatever issues and concerns you have. All of your licensees, all of your interested licensees, be out, be a part of this meeting. You don't want to miss it. Have the discussion with them. I'm excited about the discussion. I look forward to the discussion. I just don't want y'all do them what y'all do me Friday. Tell me it was coming and it ain't come. But that's a different story. You know, come out and support, get your issues and your concerns addressed. Today we have in studio with us today, C. Allen Johnson, one who is very knowledgeable about the agreement, one who knows the agreement, one who has been studying the agreement, one who also knows the Royal Commission report, one who knows even some reports that has not been filed as yet, who knows it, who understands it. And today we are following the instruction of the president of the Grand Bahama Port Authority. And so before we get into our discussion, I want the studio to play the president's instructions. Go ahead, studio.
We are open to any sort of constructive criticism. Right. I think authorities. We want to be the best.
Let me just make a
right now, we want to be the best in terms of delivery of services and our responsibilities based on the Hawksbill Creek Agreement. There are some people who do not understand what is in the agreement, and I would encourage them to please read that agreement and all the amendments. Right now, there's too much emotional charged person who lack the knowledge because they have not read.
But can you understand why people are...
And so the president said, we lack what's in the agreement, C. Allen. We lack the information, so go read it and understand it and get out your feelings. These are the words of the president. Welcome to Make It Make Sense.
Thank you so much, Bahamas. Thank you, Grand Bahama, for joining me on Darren's show. Make it make sense. I was trying to make it make sense of the statement he made because apparently maybe he hasn't read the agreement either, or if he has read it and understands it, then what is happening with the Grand Bahama Port Authority then must be a deliberate act not to fulfill its obligation to the licensees and to citizens of the Bahamas, not citizens or residents of Grand Bahama. We often isolate this agreement as if this agreement was made between Grand Bahamians and the Grand Bahama Port Authority, when this is an actual agreement between the citizens of the Bahamas, the Grand Bahama Port Authority, and the licensees of the port area. And for you homeowners, you are a form of quasi-licensee if you own land in Grand Bahama. So it involves all of us who participate in this actual economic free port. And by virtue of some things that has been done since the Hawksbill Creek Agreement that gave the Grand Bahama certain far-reaching powers. And by extension of that, then they assume responsibility. You can't take the good without the bad.
That's right.
For Grand Bahama.
So see, Alan, tell me, I'm trying to be presumptuous, disgusting. What do you think the president really meant when he made that statement? Do you think he understood what he was saying, or he was basically saying to us as a people, there's a little clause in that agreement that you're all missing. Go read it again.
I think it was an invite for us to actually, for me, but when you put in context the response that he gave and the response that the government gave, they both refer.
This is the minister
of Grand Bahama on behalf of the government. She doesn't act in isolation.
Correct.
So when she speaks for the cabinet.
Okay.
And they made implicit response that the Hawksbill Creek Agreement governs Freeport, and they are responsible for the east and west of Grand Bahama. So both of them made explicit response to this document. Now, it's amazing that Mr. Ian Roll, I think this is his 13th or 14th year as president of the Grand Bahama Port Authority. And my question to him will be, what have you done to make sure that the licensees and the residents of Freeport come to know the rules by which they would be governed by, so that we won't have these disparities in understanding and demands of whatsoever? So it seemed convenient for me that he wants to use the agreement as a pushback. And so I think, though, when he was talking in context, he may have made soup of what the Hawksbill Creek Agreement actually said and some things and practices that we've been doing, or some implications concerning these delay of concessions and, like you say, clawbacks of some things that has happened. And I think ultimately, if the Port Authority wants to act as a quasi-government, as we refer to, the legal definition for them is guardians of a trust. Then it's their responsibility to educate and inform those individuals who the trust applies to know.
So you think the president's response should have been, there is some error in which you guys are conducting or decide to take a demonstration, and for the clarity, for the record, for your information, this is what is in the agreement which governs us, GBPA.
Yes, because essentially, even if you want to take a pushback, but his statement was almost on the verge of saying all conversations that's been going on in Freeport. And so then it would have been nice of him and the Port Authority to remove themselves from the sales pitch they have of what they do and present to us in a forum type thing, which, believe it or not, the Hawksbill Creek Agreement and Royal Commission and other things imply that forums should have been created to educate and inform. If you're saying, imagine that the president of the Grand Bahama Port Authority is saying to licensees, you guys don't know the agreement you operate under.
That's right.
That's what he said.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
And so you should go read it.
Yeah.
Go read it and come back.
And come back. Okay.
And then we can talk.
Yeah, then we can talk. So
Right.
in essence, then, how did you properly execute the requirements you putting upon them, or expect them to operate in that respect of that requirements, if you yourself saying they don't know?
And this is your responsibility as the president,
Yes.
who represents the company that holds the agreement,
yes.
to make sure that my customers, that's what we are,
Yeah.
your customers, understand,
And customers and co-partners.
co-partners, correct, understands this agreement that governs all of us.
Yes.
And so you said it right. In the 14, I think it's 14 years. In the 14 years of being the president, could you pinpoint or have you done an actual town forum explaining the agreement that is there? Let's talk about Seattle and some of the things that is in this agreement that the agreement holder is in breach of. You know, we look at the state of Grand Bahama, and that was really the gist of the demonstration.
Absolutely.
The state of Grand Bahama, the Port Authority in the agreement has been charged with the responsibility for administration, for management, and for development. And they carry, and so, I mean, I looked in the agreement, I didn't see anything, and also the responsibility for licensees. So there was 4 things in the agreement that summed up the actual agreement. Their responsibility as the agreement holder, that they're obligated and they're governed by, and they're responsible for these things. So when we look at their responsibility, we should have a functioning international airport. We should have a functioning demand, because again, these are a part of the development of this island.
Absolutely. No, don't go for the island. Let's just hold them to the Freeport, because this is where he's implying that his responsibility lies. And I ask people, how many of you have ever flew into a city with no airport? How many of you have lived in a city with no fire facilities to accommodate growth and development? See, when you begin to look at these things, right? And we could take one by one. Let's use the fire suppression thing and the whole fact that when you look at the fact that government has basically built the fire stations, built the schools, built the government buildings and everything. We could go back to some things as to whose responsibility they was and how some things was clawed back and given back. But even for the things that was clawed back, the Port Authority himself has not fulfilled those agreements. And we saw a piece of that in the early 90s when we had the Free National Movement was trying to extend the concessions beyond the 1990. They gave us some facade of things like to basically pretend that certain aspects of the agreement had been fulfilled,
Right.
such as building the schools,
Correct.
such as building the court building,
Correct.
such as addressing the bridge, such as doing a lot of things. So what they did was they dressed it up. A lot of people thought it was activity, and I hear people talk about what Everson George did and everything. Well, he was a participant, in my respect, in a form of misdirecting the people, for a better word, because this was a whole intent to misdirect you from what should have been done up until 1990. And the Port Authority had failed miserably up to 1990 to actually fulfill the agreement that they wanted. So in essence, because essentially what has happened was when Everson George and Sajak took over from Wallace Groves. And actually, a lot of people may not realize that we talk about Wallace Groves, but the Grand Bahama Port Authority was in Wallace Groves' wife name because of some other legal issues that he had out of the countries. And so they took over for the development, and it kind of like staggered along. And when this agreement was coming to an end, there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't understand, some things that's apparent in this agreement that implied was supposed to happen. One of the greatest things is the Grand Bahama Port Authority should have evolved into a municipal government type environment by 1990.
Wow.
And so this whole act of taking I think they call it the island administrator or something we used to have at that time, and dressing it up in a new name called local government, because local government around the Bahamas, more so in Freeport, has no power. Local government has about as much powers as my daughters did when they were teenagers. They could have stayed out as late as they could, just be home by 7. They could drink whatever they want as long as it's water. They could wear whatever they want as long as I bought it. And so it's an illusion that you have illusion of choices. So local government has no choice. But the fact of a municipal government with its own ability for self-taxation is a threat to central governance. Some things in there also imply that as you move to municipal government and other structures, that it's inherent that you also would have a land registry. There's a lot of things that you would have, but the part of the Hawksbill Creek Agreement or its understanding that scared central government was it says no laws should apply in Freeport that doesn't apply to Bahamians everywhere. So if you give them municipal government in Freeport, you must also give them municipal government across the Bahamas.
Wow.
For you to have a land registry in Freeport, you must have a land registry in the Bahamas. And so if you look at what Freeport, the Hawksbill Creek Agreement is one of the most powerful and best agreements there is. We look at the word free port. That was not one word. And there's multiple free ports, I guess, around the world, including Sweden and other places, where people keep monies and funds and assets and things in these free port away from taxes. Mm-hmm. And we merged them together as one word to come about with the city of Freeport. But the city of Freeport, the agreement was that we were to be developed, and I love this part where people says we're not supposed to be a tourism destination, industrial. It said explicitly that we were to be developed into an industrial resort and development, housing and everything for Freeport. It says so explicitly.
It's in the agreement.
If you go back and look at the early part of Freeport, you'll see that we had over a dozen resorts in Freeport.
Correct.
And Freeport was a tourism destination.
And industrial.
An industrial sector.
Sector too.
Now, so what has happened is that we've had people, and I guess Mr. Roll is right in a certain extent, who has repeated what they have been told for the last 2.5 decades. But essentially what has happened is we go back to this story, as I'm telling you, in 1990, when this was the pre-change from the PLP, and going all the way back to the bend and break speech, that's where where the fleeing of individuals from the country began, of the investors and landholders, and a lot of assets and things was transferred to Bahamians. A lot of apartments and buildings and businesses was transferred to the workers, and that's how a lot of the transfer. Because at that particular time, probably 75-80% of people were foreigners. Right now, it's probably 80% Bahamian owners of the Freeport economy. This is why it's amazing that we own so much more but have so much less.
Correct.
And that's because a tithing of a noose has been happening around us. But in 1990, some incidents began to happen is where the holders of the Grand Bahama Port Authority, known as the St. George's family and the Sajak family, began the systematic dismantling. They began to look at the Grand Bahama Port Authority as an extraction industry, as others are now saying, to extract wealth and things out of Freeport. And you saw formation of companies around the world, including the Caymans and other places, that began to enter into the picture pre and before. And this is where we began to see things like the power company that was separated from the Grand Bahama Power Company.
And I want you, whilst you're there, on the power company, because in the same Hawksbill Creek Agreement, there is in this agreement that the development of Grand Bahama supposed to come with power and utilities at cost.
At cost.
And at no point should our power company should have been sold,
or a profit generating,
or a profit generation company,
right?
Along with our water and other amenities, which supposed to enhance it, because the president said we need to read the agreement.
Right. But see, this is why when people look at the fact that the Port Authority always want to indirectly represent itself almost as a form of a municipal governance. When do you see municipal governance around the world being run as profit centers?
Wow.
They're not.
No.
Right now, I would say to you that the Port Authority, the GBPA itself, depends on the water company and the licensees to cover its expenses.
That's right.
Because they have divested themselves of all the other assets of the city, and we're no longer run as a city for development. Now, if you look at the fact at what the Grand Bahama Port Authority do, it's supposed to act as an economic center, an incubation, a place where, as these people say, you go out and look for and have a purposefully designed a strategy for the development of the city. The Grand Bahama Port Authority, in the 2 decades I've been home, have never been able to show you a strategy for Grand Bahama or Freeport and Grand Bahama by extension, nor can they in any deliberate form show you any investments that they have initiated and they have executed. as it stands right now, the Grand Bahama Port Authority is a company that shows up at ribbon cuttings. The only thing I've not seen the Grand Bahama Port Authority at yet is a letter opening. But they are not the ones who initiate. If you hear, we oftentimes, and behemoths have adopted the position, have almost taken a position as, what is government going to do? Okay, we can ask that position from Grand Bahama, and for synergy between a national policy position and an actual development plan for Freeport. And I put to you, in spite of even the organization you put at, Reef. Reef is a wonderful book of ideas.
Yes,
And that's what it is. It's a book of ideas.
a book. It's a wish list.
Yes, of what we could do, might do, should do, can do. But there's no organization within the Grand Bahama Port Authority that even recognizes the 21st century of things that you can actually do, or the ecosystem. And essentially, the Grand Bahama Port Authority is responsible for creating an ecosystem for the enticement and growth and development of existing companies and enticement of new companies and new businesses to enter into Freeport. Whether it be let's use the new terms we like to use right now: the green economy, blue economy, orange economy, knowledge economy, conceptual economy, and digital economies. The Grand Bahama Port Authority is supposed to create an environment through their policies themselves in alignment with government, with a national policy, to actually cause individuals for these businesses to happen and be developed. If they cannot do it for localized businesses and localized behemoths to partake of it, how then you expect these multi-million and billion-dollar companies to see fruitfulness in wanting to plant themselves here for our growth and development? Let me just make one point. When you talk about the economic development of Freeport, we often hear people refer to Singapore and Estonia and Norway and everywhere. Let's use Singapore as an example. Freeport is 30 square miles smaller than Singapore. Singapore holds 6 million people. Singapore, Grand Bahama, no, I want to use Grand Bahama. Freeport is infrastructurally and intellectual property-wise and location superior to Singapore.
Wow.
Yet we do not have the development. The Bahamas is listed as the most digitally prepared country in the world.
Say it again.
The Bahamas is listed as the most digitally prepared country in the world.
Prepared.
Prepared, not used.
Prepared.
Being prepared, not used. Now hear this though.
That's why I wanted you to repeat it, because you said it. Prepared.
Freeport, out of the 200 plus countries around the world, if you pretended Freeport was a country, Freeport would be number 2. And so one has to only wonder. We have a deep water harbor. On the island of Grand Bahama, we have the second or third longest runway on this island.
On the island.
Right. In the
Caribbean.
Bahamas. In the Caribbean.
Caribbean, that's right.
In the Caribbean.
Yes, I was
right.
correct.
The Bahamas has
yesterday.
the second and third. Maguana is one. I don't know whether Freeport is longer or Maguana is longer. But that means that we could accommodate some of the major jets and things from around the world. In fact, if you go back to the Oliver North Iran-Contra affair, it happened on Freeport.
That's right. Go ahead.
And I'm simply saying is those big jumbo jets with those guns and the United States Air Force, we have to remember now the United States government had Army bases and Air Force bases all over Grand Bahama from West End to East End. So these infrastructure is still in place.
That's right.
And the problem is that we have somehow began to ignore that these infrastructure even exists. Okay? And so the question is that if you are the leader of the Grand Bahama Port Authority, at least you should be known to you is the current infrastructure and the potential
that this island has.
Possess.
That's right.
More so that you are the heart. Now, I don't want people to forget that Freeport is not the capital of Grand Bahama. West End is.
West End is.
And we'll one day have to have a conversation because we are speaking towards Freeport right now, but we must include Grand Bahama as a larger conversation, and we must be mandated to reimagine the capital. We must see West End reimagined as the capital of
that
Grand
has
Bahama.
great potential for
Yes.
great growth, for good growth, development.
In fact, I would put to you that West End, in spite of its size, can challenge Freeport for accelerated growth and input into the economic revitalization of Grand Bahama.
And that's why the governor of the Bahamas should look at their area. Yeah.
No, but this is where Ginger Moxie said that they're responsible for East and West. And so I look forward to having read the PLP Blueprint for Change and their economic plan. I look forward to the grand reveal from the Progressive Liberal Party as to their policy in relation to Grand Bahama. And by virtue of, I'm talking about Freeport. Now, I know we can come back to the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, but we must go back to 2007. Let's go back to the time I came home in after the 2002 election. In 2007, there was a debate between the two contenders for prime minister at that time, who said that there will be no economic revitalization of the Bahamian economy without Grand Bahama. Nothing happened. Come to 2012. Another argument about for the prime minister. There will be, and you could read their blueprints and go back, and the speeches are still available around. There will be no economic recovery for the Bahamas with a Grand Bahama. 2017. There will be no economic recovery without Grand Bahama. 2021. Grand Bahama is by virtue the center of our economic revitalization for the country of the Bahamas. If you wonder why nothing has happened in the Bahamas economically, it's because that very statement that Grand Bahama is the linchpin for the economic development. Let me use an example. Grand Bahama is the economic vest for the Bahamas, but it's the anchor for development of the entire Caribbean.
Wow.
And once we understand the potential of that, but development of Freeport, and I think this is where the collusion, and this is where I go along with a statement when I was walking with Gregory Morris as part of a political party, where we coined the phrase, the grand deception. Not Grand Bahama, but the grand deception. Grand Bahama development poses a threat to the power hierarchy in the Bahamas, and that's the oligarchs and the plutocrats, as well as even the real owners. And let me use an example. For the youth sports enthusiasts, you should understand this very easily. You have the fans, I call them the fanatics, the political fanatics. You know, when your team lose, you say, we'll get them next season. You have the players, that's the MPs. You know, you have the minor leagues, you call them the alternative parties trying to get to the major leagues, the players. Then you have the managers of the economy. We in the Bahamas like to refer to some family names, call them the so-called oligarchs, about 17 families. But if you actually look at the game that a lot of people ignore, there's some boxes around the top of the thing with some black glass. They're the owners of the economy. And so somehow we think that the ownership of this economy stops at these family names we like to call. But the problem is that if you go to the World Trade Organization, according to the World Trade Organization, we say the Bahamas economy is now at 13 billion. But the World Trade Organization says $3 trillion worth of commerce and sales and business occurs in the Bahamas every year. Let me repeat that. The World Trade Organization says $3 trillion of economic activity occurs in this. In our debate leading up to the WTO debate in November, released by Shivago Lang and Mr. Brent Simonet from the World Trade Organization, it was part of their reports in the full page of the newspaper. Authenticating this. Myself has been telling people for well over a decade. Nobody believed me until November when that was released, and then everybody's like, oh, it's true. But it went away because somehow we always somehow distracted by little shiny things I call fights.
Yes, we fun.
You know.
I want to go back to the agreement because I want to be able to. There's something that we touched on as relates to power.
Pause. Let's go back for power. I want to come back to the power. I think I had to finish the story. Fixing Grand Bahama poses a threat to the oligarchs and the plutocrats. They don't control the harbor. They don't control the airport. They don't control the economy. So what you have is 80% of the population living on a small island called New Providence, referred to as Nassau, and they control the economics of that island. If you were to develop Grand Bahama, and I've said this, and I invited economists and other people for the debate, and I challenged Mr. Ian Roll and the entire economic team of the Grand Bahama Port Authority to prove this wrong. If you would develop Freeport, by extension Grand Bahama, we could make 20,000 millionaires in the next 10 years.
20,000
new Bahamian millionaires. And I would like somebody to call me out on this. And that's only in one industry. We talk about all the other industries. I'm talking only about hospitality and tourism now. In the hospitality industry, and I want people to understand that hospitality is what people experience. Tourism is what people do. In 2009, I did a study for a client that showed that on Grand Bahama, we were lacking about 80,000 homes and 20,000 room nights. And that is held facts that these are what you need 10,000 for net zero. But here's what happens, and one day we're going to have a show on them to say how these can be done. What has happened is that if you were to develop Grand Bahama, imagine that you have even 20,000 families coming to Grand Bahama for jobs. A lot of people say, that's wonderful. Why wouldn't government do it? Why wouldn't they do it? Let me give you the political answer. 20,000 families relocating to Grand Bahama is 40,000 or more voters.
And
that's 8 seats that leaves New Providence and comes to Grand Bahama. So now the majority of the seats of power no longer lies in New Providence. It now lies in the out islands, with Grand Bahama holding at least a dozen. No, we already have 5 or 6.
That's right, we have 5.
We will have about 15 seats on Grand Bahama.
Wow.
Grand Bahama then becomes the center of political and economic power. And this is why you saw things like Oban and other things. These were land grabs. They were, because you cannot have the power. They do not want reasonably the power to transfer. And so this is why I simply say that, with all due respect, Ian Roll and the rest of them that sat in the Port Authority for the last 15 years have just been nothing but custodian of a broken system. And they are like mannequins. They dress up every day, go to the mall and stand around. But those mannequins have no power.
Why you call them mannequins?
Because they do nothing. You go to the mall, and just consider this a mall, an economic mall. What do the mannequins do? They look good, but they don't do nothing. And I'm simply saying is they can present their record to dispute that which I say. So it's not that they don't have the possibility. See, there's something called possibility, but the probability of being allowed to do it is not going to happen. So every now and then you'll have some announcement and some movement around. The problem is that, the movement in the Bahamas, and especially in Grand Bahama and the Bahamas, has been where Bahamians have been in the dark. And you know what happens in the dark, right? Go in the dark, and you're in the dark, and all you hear is movement. It's kind of scary. That is what is happening now to Bahamians. Bahamians have been kept in the dark about their economy and the potential of it. And they're hearing movement, and it's beginning to scare them. And so Bahamians are now calling for action, more so in Freeport, because Freeport is the linchpin for Grand Bahama by virtue of how we have set this up. Because in the immediate, we could reset this, but in the immediate, Freeport will have to serve as that economic pipeline for it. And so I want people to understand, this is about power. This is about economics and power. And they says, you need power, you need power for economics, and you need economics to sustain power. So their thing is to continuously control both. Surrender it to the people. What happens is you may have 17 families or whatever number you want to rule, but now you have 20,000 families who collectively as a swarm will devastate those people because they can form their own co-op of things how it is.
We have an agreement that governs us.
That should govern us.
That should govern us. And I think in order for any government to do what needs to be done or is possible of being done, you either have to work together with the agreement holder or move the agreement holder. Is it possible for the government of the Bahamas to cancel or to pull back this agreement?
I wouldn't want to. This is one of the best agreements that's ever existed in the world. It's the fact that this agreement and what its potential is. I mean, if you have a knife in the kitchen and you're pulling on the meat rather than cutting it, doesn't change the power of the knife.
And so what you're saying to me is we're using the agreement in the wrong way.
No, we're not using it at all.
Oh, right, yeah.
And we're not using the power of this agreement and the potential of working with government together. Again,
Who's not using?
I said we because we are, even as the people and licensees, we are collectively responsible. Let's use an example. First of all, we must understand that this is just not an agreement. This is actually a trust to establish for the benefits of the residents and the people of the Bahamas, not Freeport. It was given in a particular area for Freeport to benefit the entire Bahamas. And so Freeport, this is not an isolated where once you're in Freeport, this agreement lists in its own. If it's not, it wouldn't be on the books.
Because it's between the government of the Bahamas and the Port Authority.
Which is the people of the Bahamas.
Right.
It was people of the Bahamas. And so that agreement was between those two for the benefits of all three.
Government, port, and people.
People.
That's right.
Okay?
And who's benefiting now?
Actually, as it stands right now, the Grand Bahama Port Authority is the greatest beneficiary. The greatest beneficiary by lack of activity and revenue. I mean, if you go back to, we can go touch on the power company or even the water company. The Grand Bahama Port Authority takes no responsibility for anything that happens in Grand Bahama. Let's use the water as an example. The Grand Bahama Port Authority, since Dorian, let's go from post-Dorian, has been responsible for the potable water supply in Grand Bahama. Up until, I think, this December 13th, if my date is not correct, is correct, they never were able to provide 100% potable water across this country, across this island. But during the time of them failing to meet the international standards for potable water, the Grand Bahama Port Authority said, we will pump brackish and salt water into your home, doing millions of dollars worth of damages to your home, to your appliances, to your sinks, to everything in your house. And after Dorian. And we'll give you a 25% discount. The Grand Bahama, that's an excellent marketing strategy. The problem with that was the Grand Bahama Port Authority was not selling you water at a discount. They were selling you dirty, unusable water for 75% of their regular charge.
That's right.
Okay? At the same time...
And you're losing...
You're destroying your washing machines.
You're destroying your
I asked people to look at their sinks. You're destroying your water heater. By the way, coming back to the thing, you're actually running up your light bill because now your water heater, which accounts for almost 30% of your light bill, is not performing in the manner in which. So your light bill now is going up.
Correct.
And so no one has talked to the government nor the Port Authority, has honestly spoken to the people. You have businesses that had to go dig wells to stop the damages to their equipment and things in their building. They're not even compensated.
The port took no responsibility
for that
for the replacement
or anything
or compensation
of anyone.
That's right.
And they're now
residential homes.
They're now. But let me tell you what. See, I know people say the Grand Bahama Port Authority is now putting in digital meters. I put to you that those meters that's in the ground right now, they too are damaged. So they're putting in new meters so they can give you proper billing. So that means if your meter can't keep the proper billing, that means your billing was incorrect all the time.
So they ain't just putting in the meters because they want to run the system.
No, those meters have been corroded.
They changing out the old system and act like they're doing something.
They're doing you a favor. No, they're fixing the system. And you go and speak to any plumber. I challenge you, if you washed, if you do anything, the Grand Bahama Port Authority is responsible for the upheaval. This is the Dorian was not a new act to the Port Authority. Every time a hurricane has hit, they were well aware of the impact. In fact, in 2006, a study was done to tell them of the need to make arrangements for salt intrusion into the water supply from 2006 to 2019.
Well, they said they was waiting on Filcher to come, so now Filcher reached to get it done. I only could assume that she's now there, and we have this state-of-the-art quality system,
reverse osmosis.
And if you look at it, pre-Dorian, if you do the search of many residential homes that was not impacted by Dorian, was impacted after Dorian because
Because of the water
they
supply.
lost a lot of appliances.
Yes.
They lost
Washers,
a lot
heaters,
of
sinks,
fixtures.
fixtures in the kitchen.
Correct.
Salt in the air, because when you're doing the water, if you have stainless steel appliances, you'll begin to see rust on things.
Correct.
And corrosion. It's true. See, because water doesn't just happen; it permeates through the air.
And they only took responsibility for the white folks' appliances, because I hear some people that were saying, I would buy that back for you, but the regular Bahamians didn't get their compensation. They saying you 20% on the dirty water.
Yes. And so what happens is these are conversations that goes beyond the demands that has been made that we have to have a conversation on.
We must demand the conversation.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that when Mr. Ian Roll and them come up for this conversation, they don't come with the 2-hour monologue and then they says, okay, Mr. Johnson, you got 2 minutes. and so
They might ban you from that meeting.
See, the word communicate is getting through, not talking to, not talking about, and not talking around. So we need to have a communication thing. And then Mr. Rowland is being genuine, then why don't they talk to representatives of the community who understands their obligation and ours, as opposed to knowingly coming to a town meeting where people will express their opinion, their hurt and everything. It's a distraction. It's a facade to make believe as if though you're actually doing something. And that's all it is. What are you going to talk about? Are you releasing an economic plan for people to have input in or something? It's a griping session they're having. And they says, see, we have communicated with you. We've created a platform for you to express yourself. But when you leave there, you will still have no job. You will still have no businesses. You will still have no homes. Your mortgage will be behind. Your car payments will be behind. Your children will not have an adequate school.
But
You
see,
still have
Alan,
no
they're
fire
saying
station.
to be patient.
But, I mean, okay, Mr. Enroll, patient for your replacement or patient for you to take action?
That one there. and as we sit, and as humor as it sounds to some, and as serious as it sounds to others, these are some of the things that needs to be said. And there are many families throughout Grand Bahama, and of course the port was slapping their face. Many of our faces, we did so much after the storm. And who did you do? Which funding did you did it from?
No. See, what this again with the Port Authority is good for taking credit for others.
Right.
So you have these foreign entities that enter the Bahamas, and the Port Authority says, well, you could use one of our office rearrangements for rent, and we'll then tell people, come to us, and we'll submit the application to Mercy or somebody else. If you ask the Port Authority to give accountability for what they did, they'll be hard-pressed that they can't. But when you look overall about this whole agreement, and I think, because I'm going to start on my Facebook page and others to begin to take this apart. In a city environment that the Port Authority claims to be responsible for, we should have discussions on energy, on water, on the fire station, on the hospitals, on the schools and the airport. Let's imagine you're asking $1 million companies to come here with their employees and to build homes. There's no adequate fire suppression system to put out fire in $1 million house that you built. Okay, so that means if I come to build $1 million home, I must build my own fire suppression system. So where is the fire stations, not a location, but around this island to respond?
What is some of the responsibilities in this agreement that the port has done or is not doing?
In fact, the Port Authority has done nothing but to placate us going back to this 72. If you go back to the Royal Commission report, and you'll see some of the defects there, the port has done nothing really since then except to give us the delusion of doing anything. If the Port Authority has done what they're supposed to do, we would have a population of maybe 1 million people in Grand Bahama by now.
And so the fact that the Port Authority broke this agreement.
But let's say the agreement still holds. The agreement isn't broken.
Well, no,
they have
not broken.
failed to meet their requirement.
Correct.
Their
Yes.
requirements.
Correct.
And that is the creation
And
and maintaining for
breach.
the airport. Breach, right.
And
The airport. You have the sale of the power company. And this is my opinion. Let me say, this is the opinion of C. Alan Johnson, not the station or the host. I believe that by virtue of these international companies that the Port Authority hold, that they have an interest in the power company. See, the bare fact that the power company has less than 50 shareholders they don't need to disclose as a public company. So if you have a company that owns some shares in it, and so now they themselves is the regulators of themselves, because these are private holdings. These are laws. This is how they submit the laws. And so when they sold a company, they sold an asset of the licensees. This is part of the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, but powers to be generated at cost plus a nominal charge for infrastructural upkeep. Well, you see where now we are paying for the infrastructure through that special assessment that's supposed to start next month. And okay, we can argue we are doing what is supposed to be happening. Okay, if we are the ones to pay for this infrastructure, the nominal charge for the upkeep, then where's our power company that goes along with that agreement, that produce power at cost? The Grand Bahama Power Company, and I've said this for over a decade, operates as a guaranteed profit regime. I would like for them for 1 year to show me where they've lost a dime. Even when the population of Grand Bahama was subdued, the Grand Bahama Power Company made a profit. And so we've allowed them to begin to sell the assets. You know, we've allowed them to do, we went to this restaurant, and we said we're going to get us some steamed fish, some peas and rice, some macaroni and potato salad. And the person comes and put the dish in front of us now, and you go, that look like white rice, butter, and corn. Just imagine the fish is still there. Just imagine the peas and the thyme and the tomato paste. Just don't believe your eyes. Trust what we say, it's still the same. That is what we have allowed to happen. But this is, I'm saying to you, this co-op that the Port Authority has happened cannot explicitly happen without cooperation of our leaders.
But you said, and I want to go back to a comment you made. You said that the agreement should not be looked at being canceled, should not looked at being overturned.
Look, it should be looked at to be enforced as to its original intent.
Should the agreement holder remain in the hands of the Port Authority?
If you look at the agreement, it won't be. It would be in the form of a municipal government.
Okay, so then if the agreement is now looked at, the agreement is reviewed, and the agreement is now enforced, because we're not seeing the full enforcement of the agreement.
No.
We won't have to worry about the actual port group of companies.
No, they would go back to DevCo, to the actual development and implementation. Part of that tax incentive, and I heard one PLP spokesman says, at the tune of $144 million a year. I've maintained it as being around $125 million a year. If you look for 30 years, the Port Authority then may have saved about $3 billion in possible taxes that could have gone to the government.
Correct.
And we have nothing
off of our real property tax exemption
and other things that we do not have anything to show for it. So I'm simply saying, in the form of municipal government, where 50% of those money would stay here, plus the ability for self-taxation, we would have a free port that the rest of the Bahamas would demand that also happen for them, or for that free port to take responsibility for the whole of the Bahamas instead of Parliament. Because the potential for Freeport is so great that the actual possibilities now, especially in the 21st century, one could only ask, is Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, and Brian Blake running the Port Authority? Or if is maybe Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, and Brian Blake is now the people, the Port Authority, and the government to simply not see the potential. But again, this goes back to a power struggle. The 5-year celebrities should not be technically held responsible, except for the fact that we have not made any demand of them. And we are now making the demand of the Grand Bahama Port Authority and of the Office of the Prime Minister to bring us an economic development plan. We are saying that we will no longer make any demands on our knees. We're standing up. And so we want to know what's now, what's new, and what's next. We want to know the economic future for Bahamians, because they themselves said no free port, there'll be no Grand Bahama, there'll be no Bahamas. I think what's also important for us, though, just one sidebar in this, and I'm going to come back to the power, is that it's important now for us as Grand Bahamians to form our own Grand Bahama Economic Council. Not with them telling us these are things within us, to begin to make policy demands, to begin to make laws, demands for laws, to create the ecosystem that is necessary for us to thrive, and to create an environment for other people to come. consider that New Providence could fit in Grand Bahama multiple times. So that if you begin to look at vertical building, we could empty New Providence. And I say that Grand Bahama has the potential to empty New Providence and become the example for the other economic development of the other islands. There's no other islands that have the infrastructure that Grand Bahama have, and it will take a decade or more for any other country. Let's look at Freeport. When was the last road from 50 years ago, right? From 50 years ago, any major pavement of the major thoroughfares in Freeport? No. That's how properly built it was. I just want you to think about these communities in development. There's no major, see, because this only goes to show you that the Grand Bahama Port Authority has only been caretakers. This is when they used to build roads that last. This is when they used to build canals and walls and stuff that actually last. If you see canal walls falling now, 50 years later, it's because nothing has been done since then. When has a major canal and thoroughfare happened?
I want to put two questions to you. Well, of course, you know you're not napping on that question. So, I want to put two questions to you that's coming from those on social media. What are some of the things that the Port Authority is not living up to or in breach to? Let's go with that one.
We could just simply, the easiest thing to do is to say they have not created an environment for behemoths to grow and thrive. They have not created an environment for its licensees to grow and expand. Tell me when a business around you has grown or expanded. That's the primary goal of them, is to act as the creation of the ecosystem. The Grand Bahama Port Authority was to create an industrial sector. Tell me when is the last time we've had a major industrial growth in this country, in this island?
They did remind us during their press conference that the shipyard is getting ready to invest a couple $1 million.
No, listen to me, man. The shipyard suffered $200 million worth of damage, and they're spending $250 million to bring more upgraded equipment and bigger docks. See, that's like saying, well, I've lost my car, my Honda, during the last storm, so I'm now buying myself a new Mercedes, and as such, you can see such a great expansion due to my new automobile. No, that's the same thing.
You only spend a couple dollars more than you lost.
Then the insurance paid you. You're just buying a better car. That's not growth. That's not growth.
That's growth, though. I'm just going by what they say, see, Alan? I'm trying to help my brothers out.
But this is where they play with us. The transshipment aspect of what happens in Grand Bahama from the container port has not grown to what it's want to be. I put to you that there's some contention that exists between Hutchinson and the Grand Bahama Port Authority for the Grand Bahama Port Authority ability to meet its actual commitment between the two of them that actually then expands into us. And so it'll be easier for the Grand Bahama Authority, the list would be much easier for them to say what they've done, because there's so much things, because when you look at the ecosystem of it, where's the housing development from the 200 homes they built in the 60s when they were supposed to build 1,200?
And nothing else.
And they haven't built anything else.
Everything has been private subdivisions, privately owned,
right, I'm saying,
private developers.
So I'm simply saying is this, when you look at from a city thing, where's the airport? Where is the busing system, or what they call an infrastructural system inside of us? Even though we made subsequent arrangements or clawback concerning education, whereas the growth that has occurred in that respect of that, we have not. I ask people, we don't have to guess about what they didn't do, just by virtue of looking at the fact that they have not done anything that actually empowers or grows the Bahamian economy. The most important thing the Grand Bahama owes us today is an economic strategy, not a book of ideas, an economic strategy of what's now, what's new, and what's next, in cooperation with the Grand Bahama, with the Office of the Prime Minister, who owes us, which is obligated to us, as to what happens on Grand Bahama. And those two organizations and a representative, the Grand Bahama Port Authority also, should not be acting in isolation. Oh, by the way, Bahamians, we own 7.5% of the Grand Bahama Port Authority. No one yet knows. Let me give a quick note. There is also a minister for Freeport. No, there's a minister for Freeport. An order to table a report of the Grand Bahama Port Authority was to be tabled in the House of Assembly every 2 years. We have yet to see one. There was a minister of Freeport by virtue as the Prime Minister. The only non-Prime Minister that has ever held that position is David Thompson. But
David Thompson
has held that position
Okay.
of what he said, the Minister of Grand Bahama. But there's no report that's ever been made. And the current Minister for Freeport is Mr. Brave Davis.
That's right.
So
the Prime Minister.
A Prime Minister. And
Correct.
so what I'm simply saying is that there are individuals, and some of them have died, and I think this is deliberate. They're waiting till a lot of the people who've died. I thank for people who've given me to point me in the right direction. But we still have people like Maurice Clinton and Raul Minat has passed away, and Kemp has died, and others have died. And I took the opportunity to speak to them. But let this be the beginning of a conversation. And I know we talked about a lot of things, trying to give them context. But I think now is the time that both the government and the Grand Bahama Port Authority says the Hawksbill Creek Agreement is a conversation. Let's have that conversation, not the context that Mr. Bethel brought us last time, where they ran around town, give their diatribe, and they simply say, we want you to agree to these different things. We're talking about first having understanding of what it is, more so for licensees, which comes back again. I say to the licensees of Freeport, to combine themselves with the residents of Grand Bahama, and let's form ourselves an economic council as to the potential of Grand Bahama, as to the potential of Freeport. And instead of them telling us what they're going to do in their illusion, because what we're suffering from is the arrogance of ignorance leading to paralysis of analysis.
I just want to ask you one question before we do go. And someone's asking on the social media page, if they are in breach to their contract, can they be sued?
No, it can be held accountable. You don't have to sue them. Mm-hmm. We have the laws and this virtue of this agreement. The most powerful collection of enforcers in this country is called the voters.
That's right, the people.
The people. And this is why I say this conversation must go out to let them know that this agreement has nothing to do with the residents of Freeport. This agreement is between the citizens of the Bahamas.
That's right.
And they suffer the consequences or lack of development or whatever else as a country that we suffer. And I think this is why the conversation about Freeport must expand out of Freeport into Grand Bahama and to the wider Bahamas. And I think we as a collective, and with you have started to lead, is a good starting point for us to begin to have this conversation. And though we are asking of them what are their plans, I think it's incumbent that we have a plan to offer to them.
Correct.
Also.
Correct. Not just make the noise, but also be able to provide them with solutions
in a proactive type environment. And so we're no longer saying what is your plan. It's simply saying how do you fit into our plan. Correct. And I think we should move into this economic development plan. But on the power thing, we are now competing globally. Technology is 90% power, everything you do. Until we could get energy in this country and this island to below 10%, you will have no real growth. But I'm saying to you, and I'm going to come back here, the best response for the Grand Bahama Power Company is for us to withdraw our services. That's the conversation we have to have. The technology exists, the solar system exists. They have given us a hint because the Grand Bahama Power Company doesn't generate its power. So they can't stop you from generating because they buy power from that little company, another company on the stock exchange. So we can, by virtue, can create virtual power plants, and the resources, especially from businesses, are there for us to begin to generate our own power at 5 and 10 cents, and simply let the Grand Bahama Power Company generate power for the Grand Bahama Port Group of companies.
This has been, of course, every time we get into the meat of things, I believe that every show you have to build your foundation, and every time you get into the meat, you're out of time. But we are so grateful. We will definitely continue this conversation. I believe it's something that needs to be had. Persons are not aware of a lot of what's going on. It is, let me say this, it is the responsibility of the Grand Bahama Port Authority to educate you and to come and have those discussions rather than just saying, go read. You understand? And I can tell you as a business owner, when you rent a car from me, I just don't assume that you know what your agreements are. I go over it with you. I make sure you understand it, and I'm clear with it. We want to be able to take this opportunity to thank C. Allen. Thank you. We're going to have you back. We definitely will continue this conversation. Kingdom Worship Center International will be hosting or will be celebrating 22 years of church service throughout the community of Grand Bahama. Bishop Kermit and Minister Adrian Saunders in this coming Sunday, And so we want to take this opportunity to invite those of you that are looking for a time of worship. We start at 8:30. Time change. It goes forward. And so it's going to be this coming Sunday. We have Pastor Omar Stubbs out of Eleuthera. And so we want to invite you to be a part of our time of celebration. This has been another edition of Make It Make Sense. We're out of time. We're not out of information. We are going to continue this conversation, and we're going to do what we need to do to keep it going.
Reach out to Darren or reach out to myself so we could send you the starting point, the Royal Commission report.
Correct.
So reach out to either of us on social media platform. My telephone contact is 825-9700, and we'll send you that, and you read that, because that's the starting point for us to build forward.
Yes, the Royal Commission report is dangerous. God bless you. See you next week, same time, same place. And you know, we just might have C. Allen back.
There's a place for people like you.